The 1 and 2 seeds are gone. Duke and Kentucky are gone. Andy, I don't know who's coming out of the East region, but it's going to be wild.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into Locked On College Basketball, the only daily national college hoop show out there. And right now, I do mean literally daily, 7 days a week. My guy, Andy Patton, and I are coming at you. We're your co-hosts, and we want to thank you for joining us as we are getting ready for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. Andy, coming up in like 48 hours. Holy cow. Let's get it going. Coming up on today's show, the coaching carousel is in full swing. I'm riding the horse. Andy, what carousel animal are you on right now?
Well, we always had there's a tiger at our local carousel. So I'm going to be saying I'm on the tiger, I guess.
Yes, I love it. In fact, we had some breaking news, like literally as we hit record. So we'll give you all of that in the third segment today. But what we want to do before that is preview Thursday's Sweet 16 action. So we're going to have the East bracket followed by the West bracket. So in the East, let's start there because those are the games that tip first. TBS at Madison Square Garden there in New York City. The first game between K-State and Michigan State tips at 6:30 Eastern, followed by the 4th-seeded Tennessee and number 9 FAU 30 minutes after that first game. And Andy, here's before we get into these actual two games, as I've stopped and re-looked at what's left in the entirety of the bracket, this is the region that to me feels the most wide open now because we lost the 1 and 2 seeds, Purdue and Marquette. What a pour one out, Final Four pick in that region. But also, we had these teams in Duke and Kentucky, the 5 and 6 seeds, very talent rich, although slightly lower seeded. And you and I talked kind of ad nauseum about how great Duke was playing. All of this, Kentucky, while they've been that inconsistent for a long time and have had some injury issues, it's Kentucky, right? And they usually peak around right now. Well, all 4 of those teams are gone. And that leaves us with Kansas State, Michigan State, Tennessee, and FAU. And you start looking at it and you realize, hey, it's not some out there in the ether thing right now. One of those 4 teams will 100%, unless the tournament ends because of a global pandemic again, one of those 4 teams will be a Final Four participant.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I think a lot of people didn't have chalk in this region when looking at the bracketology. I think there was a lot of hesitation about Purdue, not just from us, but from many others. I think there was a lot of hesitation about Marquette as well because the defense just kind of wasn't there. And so I think people seeing a lack of a 1 and a 2 seeds coming out of the East region maybe isn't shocking. But most people kind of picked up the slack there by expecting either Duke or Kentucky. Like you said, like those were kind of the trendy non-1 seed, non-2 seed picks to come out of the East region. And instead, we don't have any of those 4 teams. All of them are gone. We're left with the teams that I think, quite honestly, without having looked at the data, but the teams that I think were generally the least projected teams to come out of here. Kansas State, I mean, this is a team that was picked to finish last in the Big 12 in the preseason. Like they were not expected to be a contender for a Big 12 tournament championship. They weren't expected to be nationally ranked. They were certainly not expected to get a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament if they were expected to make the NCAA tournament at all. And yet here we are with this team taking care of business in the first round, with this team taking care of business in the second round against Kentucky. And now they're advancing into the Sweet 16. They have one of the best young guards, or one of the best guards in the country, in Marquise Noel. Keontae Johnson's been playing fantastic. And we're talking about, it's a 3 seed. It shouldn't be shocking, but considering where they came from, that's extraordinary. And then you have Tennessee, 4 seed, again, a team that was in the top 10 at times throughout the regular season. So definitely not shocking that they're here either, but they lost to Kai Ziegler to an injury and they weren't playing particularly well down the stretch. And coming up against a hot Duke team, it was definitely not expected that they would be the team advancing there. And then going down, of course, you have a 7 seed and a 9 seed. That's always unusual. Michigan State, it's not unusual to see Tom Izzo here. That's something that they do a lot. We talked about this on a recent show. I believe Michigan State has advanced to the Sweet 16 as a 7 seed 3 times under Tom Izzo. So this is something that, again, January, February, Izzo, April, May, etc. Like that is what Tom Izzo and that team does. And then, of course, you have FAU. Florida Atlantic, possibility to go to the Final Four for this program. And I think you just look at again, you look at the South region, and Alabama is there with a handful of other teams that are kind of plucky underdogs, Creighton, San Diego State, Princeton, of course, but Alabama's probably going to make it out of that region. Maybe not, but that's not exactly going to be a big shock. Out of here, it's going to be one of those four teams. And either way, I think the story is very, very cool. You have an injured Tennessee team, a Michigan State team that is the only Big Ten school remaining that obviously had a horrific act of violence on their campus at East Lansing earlier this year. And then, of course, FAU. It's a really, really fun region, and I'm glad that one of these four teams is going to be dancing in the Final Four.
Yeah, and Andy, even looking at it, I think people look at that and see the FAU of it all and think, oh, they're so much further behind everybody else. Let's look at KenPom rankings really quick. Tennessee is 6th, but then these other three teams are all jumbled right together. Kansas State 21st, Florida Atlantic 22, and Michigan State 25.
Wow.
And so, I mean, like at this point, not only is this region wide open because of the 1 and 2 going down in Duke and Kentucky, but man, they are jumbled together in terms of how KenPom sees them, and I am here for it. So this is wide open and potentially really, really exciting. So don't count out FAU, folks, as a potential Final Four participant.
Yeah, and I think the matchup that I'm really looking forward to, as much fun as that one is going to be, I think this Kansas State-Michigan State game is going to be really, really fun. And we're seeing right now FanDuel has the Spartans. How many of those teams favored by 1.5 points on FanDuel? And I'm surprised by this. I think there's a lot of people really counting out Kansas State, and I'm not sure why after they beat Kentucky. And once we saw that game, we saw how Marquise Noel played in that game. We saw how Keontae Johnson played. Jerome Tang's teams play elite defense. Like this is a really, really good team. And I'm surprised. Michigan State, I mean, no disrespect to them. Obviously, they beat a good USC team. They beat an even better Marquette team in the second round, and in a game where the expectation was, well, guard play is going to win out, and Marquette had better guards, and that wasn't the case in that game. Michigan State did a good job defensively on Tyler Kolek and slowed him down, and was able to get really productive performances from Tyson Walker and Madi Sissoko, and had a really good game. But I'm not sure if they can do it again. And for me, like, I think Kansas State is a better team. It's hard to bet against Tom Izzo in March.
Yeah.
Really, really hard to bet against Tom Izzo in March. But to me, I think Kansas State's going to take this one.
I'm right with you. This is a wrong team favorite situation, Andy. Wrong team. We often talk about, like, every time the line setters get it right somehow, some way. But come on, like, no, this is wrong team favored for Kansas State. Like, you were talking about that defense, and I'm right with you on that. And I think here's the thing, Andy, we've gesticulated. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
I like it.
We've theorized, we've thought about so much, like, how will these Big 12 teams do coming out of Big 12? Will it have been this battering ram of a conference that leaves them all beaten and bloodied and broken? Or will they, like, breathe a sigh of relief and just start steamrolling people getting out? Well, we're down to just Kansas State and Texas left out of the Big 12. And of course, some of that's matchups, but some of it is maybe teams not as good as thought. But with Kansas State, I think they are showing, like, what happened in Big 12 play for them was no fluke. I'm right with you. I'm following that Kansas State should knock off Michigan State on Thursday night. 30 minutes after that game ends, we will get a tip between 4th-seeded Tennessee and 9th-seeded FAU. Tennessee, the line started with the Vols favored by 5.5. It's moved slightly to them being favored 4.5. You never know what causes that movement, but I'll tell you what it is. Don't trust Tennessee, Andy. We're going to keep using that refrain, even though that for those who haven't been with us, that's been like a season-long running joke for us here on the show. Don't trust Tennessee. But Andy, I still feel that way. However, at this point, they might be the favorite to come out of this bracket of these four. I haven't looked up, the odds on the East region or whatever, but given the defense, like K-State's defense is great, Tennessee's defense is elite, even without Zakai Ziegler. The question is just going to be, where does the offense come from? And you never know from one game to the next. That said, keep in mind, good people out there. No team has ever won the national championship shooting under 32.9% from three. We're going to keep banging that home into your heads. So Tennessee might reach the Final Four, but I will stay on this that they will not be your national champion.
Well, Isaac, we got more stuff coming, previewing these games, looking at some Final Four predictions, looking at the potential most improved players, most outstanding players in each of these regions. But what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the West region because it no longer features Kansas, but the 2 seed, the 3 seed, and the 4 seed all remain in what should be some really, really exciting basketball on Friday. Before we get into that, though, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Make sure you check out all of the lines for this weekend's Sweet 16 games. We covered a few of them there. We got more to cover coming up here in the second segment. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Isaac. West region, Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena, CBS. We got ourselves a couple of fantastic basketball games. Look, the big story in the West region was initially the placement of Kansas in the West region, with many expecting that they would get the Midwest region and that Houston would be the team headed out west. When that did not happen, there was a lot of conversation around Kansas of, is this a bad draw for them? They got UConn or St. Mary's in the Sweet 16. Then they got either Gonzaga or UCLA, most likely. Are they even going to be able to come out of the region? And here's the deal. They didn't even make it to the Sweet 16. This team ran into a buzzsaw in Arkansas in the second round. Arkansas defeated them, and now we have a Sweet 16 out of the West region with a 2 seed, a 3 seed, a 4 seed, and an 8 seed in Arkansas. And I think it sets up some really interesting matchups because Arkansas, yes, they are an 8 seed, but they are not your typical 8 seed. This was a top 10 preseason team, a team that dealt with injuries throughout the year, a really, really dynamic, talented squad that, I mean, didn't just beat Kansas because Kansas had an off night. They beat Kansas because they played really, really well against a good Kansas team. So I think there's a lot of intrigue in this region. There's a lot of really, really good teams. And I think we're going to see some good basketball being played on Friday.
Oh, we absolutely will. Andy, I just talked about the Ken Palm rankings of the teams in the East bracket. Listen to this. We have 3 of the top 7 Ken Palm teams.
Yep.
UCLA 3rd, UConn 4, Gonzaga 7, and Arkansas themselves are. So let's not, if you do the math, an 8 seed would be like teams up through 32, right? 30, 20, whatever, 29, 30, 31, and 32. Arkansas is 19th overall at Ken Palm. And so this bracket continues to be, or this region continues to be the region of death. And like you said, I am thrilled to see these matchups. Like it should be epic. All 4 games, just because UCLA Gonzaga is the maybe more anticipated. Let's not sleep on UConn Arkansas. That's going to be an electric game itself. However, Andy, even though UCLA Gonzaga is the game that tips off second of these, I want to start with this one because it's got some electric history in the NCAA tournament. The line for this game started at 1.5 for UCLA. It's since moved to the Bruins favored by 2.5. Andy, I know that you have had your eyes very closely on this history. Talk to us some about these games from 2006 and 2021.
Yeah, the Gonzaga UCLA has kind of emerged as one of the top tier West Coast rivalries in college basketball, mostly in the tournament. They've played each other in non-conference games occasionally as well. And I think the Gonzaga-Arizona rivalry is the one that people were expecting to peak. And there was a lot of Mark Fever, Sean Miller battles in non-conference before Sean Miller left Arizona. They have not played each other since Tommy Lloyd came in. They probably will not for a while just because of the close relationship of those two coaches. So it's kind of moved over to being a Gonzaga versus UCLA type thing. And of course, 2006, 17 years to the day that this game is going to be played on Thursday, was a 17-point comeback by UCLA late in the second half. They won the game. Adam Morrison cried on the court. It's been people have carried signs of Adam Morrison crying to Gonzaga away games for the last 17 years from that. Very, very iconic moment in NCAA tournament history, certainly in the history of both of those two programs. And then, of course, you have 2021. A rematch, not even their first rematch in the NCAA tournament, mind you. They played each other as well, and I think 2015 or 2016, Gonzaga won that one. But 2021 was in the Final Four. Both really, really good teams. UCLA was a play-in 11 seed that made it all the way to the Final Four. Gonzaga was a undefeated 1 seed. Played them really, really close. Hit that Johnny Juzang hit that lay-in 90-90 with 3.5 seconds left. Jalen Suggs gets one step past half court, pulls up, banks it in, ends UCLA's season, continues Gonzaga's undefeated season for 2 more days before Baylor smoked the doors right off of them in the early part of that game. But an incredible, extraordinary game, 2 elite NCAA tournament battles, both between Gonzaga and UCLA. Very, very cool that we are getting to see this rematch again. And it's going to be an interesting matchup. UCLA is one of the best defensive teams in the entire country, top 2 in KenPom right now, but they are without Jalen Clark, who is the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. And then we have this issue with David Singleton, where David Singleton, he went down with an ankle injury at the very end of their game against Northwestern. It looked very bad. Broadcaster Brendan Haywood was basically like pleading with them to not replay it because of how bad it looked. But then the reports seem to indicate that he might be fine, that he might be able to play. And so we haven't heard anything definitive as we're recording this right now. I think it's notable that the line went from 1.5 to 2.5. I don't know. Vegas tends to know things before anybody else does. So UCLA getting a bump there is probably means something. So that might be worth keeping an eye on as well there. But Adem Bona, of course, has been banged up. He's been playing in the NCAA tournament. He's their star freshman post, but they're going to need every single percentage that he can give them in that game, because defending Drew Timme is really, really hard. And UCLA, they don't have the size in the front court that a lot of other teams who might match up a little bit better with Gonzaga do, but they're still an elite defensive team. And on the other side of the ball, Gonzaga doesn't stop dribble penetration well, and UCLA's got guys who do that extraordinarily well. So it's going to be a high-level basketball game between 2 really good teams.
It really will. Excuse me. And UCLA, Andy, I think for both of us has looked a lot better than we thought they would be without Jalen Clark, and has given reason to think like, hey, UCLA might have had a circle the wagons moment where they just figured out what do they need to do and ran that playbook, whatever it was, really well in the first weekend of the tournament. The question is now, as the competition level steps up, can they continue to do that again against Gonzaga, and then potentially against, if they make it on, either UConn or Arkansas in the Elite Eight. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens, because I mean, it's just a different playing field with brighter lights, and you just never know. I have no reason to think that they won't, especially if Singleton and Bona are both ready to go. Now, if either or both of those guys are out, we could be in for Mark Few's crew moving on pretty easily. Speaking of that UConn Arkansas matchup, let's move on to it, where FanDuel has UConn favored by 3.5 points. And Andy, like, the storyline here is Adama Sanogo. He has been what I think both of us would say, if not the best player, one of the top 2, 3, 4 players in the entire tournament so far. So there's that. The interesting thing, though, is while we're talking so much about UConn's front court with he and Donovan Clingan, the conversation for Arkansas is all about the backcourt, guys like Black and Walsh, and if Nick Smith can get going, it's all about the backcourt. And so I love matchups like this where it's like, we're going to score inside, but then the other team's going to come down and just race it down your throat. How do you see that balance of power playing out in the earlier game for the West region, which will tip off at 7:15 on CBS?
We talk a lot about how important guard play is in March, and UConn has kind of bucked the trend a little bit by being so overly reliant on Adama Sanogo, and he's the leading scorer in the NCAA tournament through the first couple of games. I mean, we talked about Gonzaga a little bit as well, and they have done something similar where they rely very heavily on Drew Timme. And I think for UConn, the big question is going to be what their guards can do. Can Tristan Newton step up? He's shot less than 42% from the field in the NCAA tournament so far. Can Jordan Hawkins step up? He's been much better, but can they do it against Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh, two really, really good perimeter defensive players for Arkansas? Like, I think that's the story. And then offensively, like, can Arkansas figure out a way to acclimate Nick Smith into the offense? He scored 6 points in 2 NCAA tournament games. He has not been good. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. And they've been relying more on Black and more on Jordan Walsh. And of course, Ricky Council has been extraordinary. And I think Arkansas has the better guard play. And that tends to be the thing that wins out. But there's such a massive discrepancy in terms of what UConn can do in the front court with Sanogo and Klingon that it's hard to bet against them on that either.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're at that point, similar to what I said about for UCLA, we get to the point stepping up the competition level. This is the point at which that might get exposed. I think the same is true now for Arkansas with Nick Smith. If they can't get him going, this is the moment where these higher elite teams are going to find ways to say, all right, Arkansas, if you can't get your most talented player acclimated, and understandably so for Arkansas, who's been without him the majority of the season. Right. Now we're going to expose that and send you back to Fayetteville, which I just drove through last night. I've been through all these places. It just keeps hitting me. And so I waved hi to Fayetteville, got some Zaxby's as we went through. And I said, listen, Must Bus, I want to see that shirt off again on Thursday and Saturday. You guys getting ready to go to the Final Four? No, we'll wait and see what happens with this game. And folks, we'll have our picks for all these Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games coming up for you on Thursday's show. And so we've had Thursday's games today. We're going to have Friday's games on Wednesday's show. But now, to wrap today's show, we already teased off the top. We got some great coaching carousel movement. Rick Pitino is back in the Big East, Andy, for the third time, and is having the opportunity to make St. John's immediately relevant again. Well, Ed Cooley did something no Big East coach has dared to attempt before him. How will it work out? And, oh, by the way, FDU cashing in on that historic upset over Purdue. We're going to talk about all of that in just a second. All right, Andy, 2 massive Big East hires and then the resulting things that happen as a follow-up to the coaching carousel action. We've got Ed Cooley moving to Georgetown. We got Rick Pitino coming back to the Big East and St. John's, and we're going to talk about each of these individually. But before we get there, I think these are 2 great hires for the Big East. We've talked so much this season about how strong the Big East has been, and I think that both of these hires only serve to solidify the Big East standing amongst the conference elites in Division I, just continuing to raise the profile of this conference, which, as we said, has already had a big year, has 3 teams in the Sweet 16, tied for the most in the country. What do you think about these 2 hires?
The Big East is back, man. I mean, that quite honestly, that's what this means to me. It's a Monday in the middle of the NCAA tournament, and the news cycle was all about the Big East on Monday. All of it. 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. Rick Pitino coming back to join St. John's. What's going to happen at Providence? Is Ed Cooley leaving? Is he staying? And there was some drama. There was some intrigue. There's some anger. There's some emotion. The Big East is like the mecca of college basketball historically. You look at the 80s, you look at the early 90s, you look even into the mid 90s with Allen Iverson and UConn's rise to prominence with Jim Calhoun and everything. And we're talking about like the premier college basketball conversation starter in the Big East. And then it died. I mean, it died. Like it just dismantled. They brought it back together. They kind of shoehorned some other programs in, some that have worked out really, really well. Like Marquette, obviously being a 2 seed and winning the Big East tournament this year. Some that have not worked out as well. Getting UConn back was great. Some, Butler and other programs that haven't really risen the level of the conference as much as they might have hoped. But look at the coaches that are in this conference now. Of course, Ed Cooley remains in the conference, but he jumps to a more prominent program. You add Rick Pitino, you already have Shaka Smart, you have Sean Miller, you have all of these just incredible. Thad Matta. You have Shaheen Holloway did a really, really nice job. Kyle Neptune, I think, is going to be a solid coach in time. Like, we're talking about some really, really good coaches, and I think Providence is going to make a good hire. We haven't heard specifically what they're going to do yet. Micah Shrewsbury is rumored there out of Penn State.
I would love that. I would love that.
That would be huge. I think that'd be huge. But Yeah, Ed Cooley, like this is crazy. He left a Big East job for another Big East job. That has never happened before. And we're talking two OG Big East programs. Like, with no disrespect, but if a Butler coach left to go to Marquette, yes, it would be that same situation. But we're talking like programs that have hated each other since the 80s. Like, these programs have been together forever. And now Georgetown and Providence have this hated thing between them, with Ed Cooley going to Georgetown. That first game Georgetown plays in the dunk, oh my goodness, he is going to hear it. It is going to be like intense, for lack of a better word. It is going to be loud. It is going to be boisterous. And there is going to be some feelings being felt in that stadium at Ed Cooley. And I understand the decision that he made. I think the way that it happened was tough. And I understand the front. Providence fans are not happy right now. And I understand it. They feel like they're losing recruits. They're losing, like, all this family atmosphere that was built at Providence just kind of went away somewhat suddenly. And it's hard. It's always hard to lose a coach. To lose a coach to a conference rival like that is I mean, there's a reason it's never happened in the Big East, and it's going to be intense to see. But at the same time, Cooley's got a chance to really do some good things with Georgetown. And I think that I don't think it's going to take them too long to get this program back to relevance. In the era of NIL and the era of the transfer portal, having a good high-profile coach like that come into your program, like, I think Ed Cooley's going to turn this thing around for the Hoyas within a year.
The most recent parallel I can think of with that intra-conference thing you're talking about there is Chris Beard going from Texas Tech to Texas. And the straight-up vitriol he experienced when he had to go back to Lubbock, which, by the way, with Texas moving to the SEC, he's going to have to do again when Ole Miss travels to Austin. So I cannot wait for that. Anyway, Georgetown, Andy, is just one of those programs that college basketball is better when Georgetown basketball is good. Like, that's just a truism. And I hate that the Patrick Ewing thing didn't work out, but it just didn't. And that's the thing sometimes. And hopefully he's able to still maintain a good and healthy relationship with Georgetown, because you don't want to see animosity there. But I mean, it was bad, Andy. Like, I could take you through all the numbers, but let's just say this. The last 2 seasons, things have gone from mediocre for Patrick Ewing to worse. 13-50 overall, 2-37 in Big East play. 6 seasons there, 1 winning season, that one NCAA tournament, and that was only because they made that miracle Big East run. But I think the thing for me that's perhaps the biggest feather in the cap that helps me think Cooley's going to do great is that when Ewing was at Georgetown, he severely underachieved. And while Ed Cooley was at Providence, he severely overachieved. You look at the past 2 seasons when he won the Big East regular season last year and came very close to doing so again this year. And so, Andy, before we move to Pitino at St. John's, I want to ask this question, or actually have you finish this statement. I guess I'll say it that way. 5 years from right now, Ed Cooley will have taken Georgetown to blank NCAA tournaments.
I'm going to say 4.
Oh, I like that. What's the off year? Is it this first year, or is it somewhere in the middle?
I think it's the first year, but it also wouldn't shock me if they make a run this year, stumble in year 2, and then start cruising after that.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. For me, it's 4, and it's a sophomore slump, right? Like, you spend, a band spends all of their lives working on their first album, and it's the second one that sucks, and then they pick it up after that. I think it's 4, and I think it's year 2 where they miss out.
Isaac, Rick Pitino's back.
Woo!
Rick Pitino is back in the big leagues, with no disrespect to Iona, but he is back in the Big East. That is where he's wanted to be. 3rd different Big East school for him, 6th different program. An extraordinary career, a career marred in controversy, in various other things. Of course, the Louisville situation, losing that NCAA tournament championship in 2013, won a national championship in 1996 that still hangs. He does have the banner for that one at Kentucky. Has taken 3 schools to the Finals 4 in Louisville, Kentucky, and then Providence back in 1987. Friar's still in the conversation here. I love this move. I absolutely love this move. I know that there's controversy with Pitino, obviously, but he's, there's no more NCAA punishments. He's back with in the area he wants to be. He doesn't have to move. He can stay at St. John's. He's going to get New York guards. He's going to get Manhattan guards into this program. I think this is going to be so fun. I think Pitino being willing to coach another school in the Big East just proves how much he loves that conference. He's been an integral part of the conference since, shortly after it started in the 80s when he was at Providence, of course. And I think that seeing him back in this conference, even at his advanced age. He signed a 6-year contract, which is kind of
The
wild.
dude is 70. Andy, he'll be 76 when this contract is up.
Yeah, he's he doesn't want to quit it. That's for darn sure, and he's going to stick around and keep doing it. And I think this is a really fun hire, and I'm excited to see what happens at St. John's. It's unfortunate that Mike Anderson is unhappy with the situation that he was put into as the former coach. He is suing the school, and we'll certainly provide updates on that as we hear more about that situation and his allegations and everything there. But I understand the desire to bring Rick Pitino in. I understand the desire to bring a coach with winning mentality who's been in the Big East, who's recruited successfully on the East Coast. And I mean, similar to the question you asked before with Georgetown and Ed Cooley, like, I think Rick Pitino is going to get St. John's back in the dance, and I think it's going to happen soon. And I'm maybe not 4 out of the next 5 years, but give me 3 years out of the next 5 where St. John's is going to be in the big dance because of Rick Pitino.
I'm going with 4 with this one as
Nice.
well, but I think the opposite. I think it'll be this first year where it's just going to take a little bit longer to turn the tide at St. John's. I don't know what gives me that vibe, but I think it will. Right now, Rick Pitino is one of only 4 coaches to take 5 different schools to the NCAA tournament. And Andy, very quickly, he will become the only coach to take 6 schools to the NCAA tournament. And I think that just shows how you should believe in Rick Pitino, that in any era of college basketball, he's going to get it done. Andy, very quickly, can you name the other 3 coaches who have taken 5 schools to the NCAA tournament?
Oh, man. No is what I'm going to say as my first answer.
Okay.
Cal hasn't been at 5, has he?
Correct. He's close. One is a recent retiree whose son took over for his Big 12 school, had previously been somewhere in the state of Nevada.
Ooh, too many hints. I'm out.
Lon Kruger.
Oh, Kruger. Okay.
UNLV. And then Steve Alford, who just recently did it by taking Nevada. And then the other, interestingly enough, another guy who had been at Kentucky and won a national championship, Tubby Smith.
Yep.
Tulsa, Georgia, Kentucky, Minnesota, and Texas Tech for Tubby. And so, Andy, I'm right with you. I love Pitino getting back to this thing. I think Louisville jumped the gun a little bit on letting him go because we've seen basically none of these other coaches get fired for what they did. And so, I mean, there's the Will Wade and Sean, whatever, but I think Louisville probably could have fought that off. And so I'm just really glad to see him back at this level. Same with it's good for college basketball for Georgetown to be relevant. It's good for college basketball to have Rick Pitino back in the show, as you said. And oh, by the way, we teased some breaking coaching carousel news. Literally, as we hit record, we learned that Fairleigh Dickinson's Tobin Anderson is going to be the one replacing Pitino at Iona. Great stuff there. Love to see him able to parlay that run into this, and hopefully the Gales will stay relevant. So, Andy, coaching carousel is all around us, and it will only continue to spin.
Well, Isaac, want to thank you, of course, for how much work you have done as we have done in March here. We're recording every single day for the listeners. Thank you so much for sticking with us. It has been so much fun to get the opportunity to cover what has been a wild March Madness. And we're not done. We're coming at you every single day for the rest of the month, previewing Final Four games, Elite Eight games, continuing to talk about the coaching carousel, talking about the transfer portal, everything that is going on in this wonderful, beautiful, insane game of college basketball that we cover. And we're going to be with you long after the season is over, throughout the spring, throughout the summer, going into next season. So stick with us. You can find us on YouTube at Locked On College Basketball. Hit that big red subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can leave us comments on YouTube. You can find the show wherever you get podcasts as well. Much more coming your way later this week. More coverage coming on the upcoming Elite Eight matchups, Sweet 16 matchups, I should say, going into the Elite Eight. So stick with us. For now, though,
peace.
Peace out.